I watched her eyes turn slightly glassy, and ached to know that I had hurt her again. She was hiding it from me, too. I knew that. I could see that part of her wanted to be able to talk about it with me, but she was worried I wouldn't want to hear, which I didn't. But that didn't mean I wouldn't listen, if it would help her to heal some of the pain. I reached out to touch her face, lifting her chin up gently so she could see the sincerity in my eyes. I felt her relax under my touch, though her expression was still agonized. "Sorry," I repeated, "really." "I know. I know it's not the same. I shouldn't have reacted that way. It's just that, well, I was already thinking about Jacob before you came over." She paused, probably worried about offending me. I tried to keep the ire out of my eyes, as my thoughts drifted to less than pleasant thoughts about Jacob. I could feel the frustration building, so I returned my focus to Bella. I knew she thought about him often, and yes, it upset me. But still I wanted her to open up. "Charlie says Jake is having a hard time," she continued, even more quietly than before. "He's hurting right now, and it's my fault." "You've done nothing wrong, Bella." I felt my posture relax infinitesimally. It was easier to think that Bella's concern for Jacob was a product of the irrational guilt she often placed on herself. Anything was better than thinking that there were unresolved feelings for him under the surface, feelings I could not fault her for, but that were slowly eating away at me. I knew what Jacob had been to her during my absence, and while I was grateful for whatever ability he had to heal her, I wanted to believe his part of the story was over. "I need to make it better, Edward. I owe him that much. And it's one of Charlie's conditions anyway." I felt my body tense and my fist clench. If only Charlie knew what he was sending Bella into. Not that a vampire would be much of an improvement over a werewolf, if he knew the truth. Still, it didn't seem fair that Charlie was pushing Bella into Jacob's arms while he loathed my very existence. "You know it's out of the question for you to be around a werewolf unprotected, Bella. And it would be breaking the treaty if any of us crossed over onto their land. Do you want us to start a war?" "Of course not." "Then there's really no point in discussing the matter further." I tried to fill my voice with a sense of finality, but I knew Bella better than that. The subject was far from over. The most I could hope for at this point was to delay it until we had both had time to calm down. Desperate to talk about something, anything else, I glanced behind her at the book she had set aside earlier. "I'm glad Charlie has decided to let you out. You're sadly in need of a visit to the bookstore. I can't believe you're reading Wuthering Heights again. Don't you know it by heart yet?" "Not all of us have photographic memories," she snapped, still upset. What I wouldn't have given for Charlie to magically disappear into his room, so I could sweep Bella upstairs and make everything right again. She always seemed so much more forgiving when she was in my arms. Reluctantly, I settled for discussing her book. Maybe she would finally be able to explain what she found so enjoyable about it. "Photographic memory or not, I don't understand why you like it. The characters are ghastly people who ruin each other's lives. I don't know how Heathcliff and Cathy ended up being ranked with couples like Romeo and Juliet, or Elizabeth Bennet and Mr. Darcy. It isn't a love story, it's a hate story." "You have some serious issues with the classics," she said bitterly. "Perhaps it's because I'm not impressed with antiquity," I said with a smirk. When she didn't respond, I started to wonder if discussing the book had been a bad choice. Maybe I'd actually offended her and made everything worse. I hoped she didn't think I was trying to pick a fight, or turn her against one of her favorite literary couples. I just generally needed to understand why such a dark story would have captured her heart so completely. "Honestly, though, why do you read it over and over?" I asked, eyes pleading as I reached out to touch her face. "I'm not sure," she breathed, her expression softening at my sudden interest. "I think it's something about the inevitability, how nothing can keep them apart. Not her selfishness, or his evil, or even death in the end." And somehow I started to understand. Though it may never sit on my shelf among my favorites, I could begin to see what had intrigued Bella. I myself understood something about inevitability, though before Bella it had only manifested itself in my mind as an unchangeable life I had been doomed to live in. Then miraculously she had changed everything. All the things I had lived through and experiences I had had seemed to have been working together to bring me to her. By all accounts, I should have left this earth long ago. I shouldn't be here to love her. Yet, here I sat, against all odds, with my reason for being at my side. I certainly didn't deserve it. I was as vile a being as Heathcliff. I wished I could be better for her. I still think it would be a better story if either of them had one redeeming quality, I added with a smile, trying to push away my feelings of unworthiness. I had promised myself to stay away from that conversation involving my not deserving her. Though I would always know it's true, it seemed to upset her to hear me speak it aloud. I think that might be the point, she continued. Their love is their one redeeming quality, as Bella was mine. I hope you have better sense than that, to fall in love with someone so malignant. It's a bit late to worry about who I fall in love with, she assured me. But even without the warning, I seem to have managed fairly well. I laughed under my breath. Of course I didn't agree, but I'd be lying if I said I hadn't been hoping to hear those exact words. I'm glad you think so, I said with a grin. Well, I hope you're smart enough to stay away from someone so selfish. Catherine is really the source of all the trouble, not Heathcliff. I'll be on my guard. The atmosphere had grown lighter, and I began tracing her soft cheeks with my thumb. It felt so natural, having her face resting gently in my hands. She leaned into my touch with a sigh, closing her eyes for a moment before her expression shifted once again. I need to see Jacob, she said firmly, and I shut my eyes to momentarily escape her stare. No. It's truly not dangerous at all. I used to spend all day in La Push with the whole lot of them, and nothing ever happened. She had never gone into specifics about her time with the wolves. I'd honestly been happy not knowing exactly how deep into their world she had let herself fall, but something in her voice told me she had seen at least a glimpse of what I had been warning her about. Her heart beat steadily faster as I allowed whatever memory had taken hold of her to unfold completely. Her eyes widened, and I nodded understandingly. She hadn't been hurt, but there had been a moment of danger. Werewolves are unstable, I said, my voice even but firm. Sometimes the people near them get hurt, sometimes they get killed. I watched as her expression shifted again, and it was a battle not to ask what she had witnessed. I didn't want to think of her ever having been in peril, especially when I knew it was my fault she had been put in that position. My leaving had forced her to seek refuge in a place where she could only find more danger. You don't know them, she finally said, her voice barely a whisper. I know them better than you think, Bella. I was here the last time. The last time? We started crossing paths with the wolves about 70 years ago. We had just settled near Hokum. That was before Alice and Jasper were with us. We outnumbered them, but that wouldn't have stopped it from turning into a fight, if not for Carlyle. He managed to convince Ephraim Black that coexisting was possible, and eventually we made the truce. I paused for a moment, thinking back to the courage Carlyle had shown. He knew it would be difficult to convince them that our family was different, but his desire for peace among our kinds was so strong, Ephraim couldn't in good conscience refuse us. So many decades had passed since the days of the wolves, we were certain that whatever danger had brought them about in the first place was long gone, and our adherence to the treaty had showed them our trustworthiness. We'd always assumed there had been someone there actively continuing the line, so when Ephraim was gone and no new wolves emerged, we were convinced their time had ended. We thought the line had died out with Ephraim, that the genetic quirk which allowed the transmutation had been lost. I whispered, lost in thought. I looked up at Bella, wondering how it was even possible we were having this conversation. How had the wolves resurfaced, and why? Your bad luck seems to be more potent every day. Do you realize your insatiable pull for all things deadly was strong enough to recover a pack of mutant canines from extinction? If we could bottle your luck, we'd have a weapon of mass destruction on our hands.